Hi. So, for my two dialectical tensions, I chose tensions between certainty and uncertainty, and between overt communication styles and covert communication styles. And so, for uncertainty and certainty, I've noticed tensions between people who have different preferences between the two. Some feel most comfortable with certainty, feeling uneasy when others don't provide it. Some prefer uncertainty as to not be restricted, feeling confined by overstructuring and feeling uncomfortable promising certainty themselves. And so, when working with conflicting personalities, I find it important to appeal to both preferences. When the other side doesn't feel considered, they tend to impose their preferences even more on others. Um, the certainty people tend to be sort of controlling when others refuse structure or refuse to make promises, and the uncertainty people tend to become defiant and apathetic when others refuse to give them breathing room or compromise. And so, when both personalities meet halfway, they can actually enjoy working together. And I believe that their strengths and weaknesses, that's, I guess, the sort of dichotomy of their tendencies, complement each other and can create a more effective team than just a group of all the same sort of type. Um, and yeah, so the other one, overt and covert communication styles. Um, so I've also noticed a conflict between these sort of personality traits, even. Um, Overt communicators tend to be more comfortable asking for things that they want, being more honest and saying no. Covert communicators tend to be comfortable doing these things, uncomfortable doing these things. And they prefer to use subtextual communication, emotional communication, and both of these types really clash with each other. Um, I've seen like the overts tend to feel frustrated, feeling like they have to read the covert's mind, and they tend to find them confusing and sometimes even manipulative. Coverts tend to find the overts inconsiderate, dominating, and uncompromising. And if these types seem reminiscent of some modern definitions of narcissism, you'd be correct. There's modern definitions of narcissism being overt narcissism, which is like the dominating type, and covert narcissism, otherwise known as egoism. And so an important distinction is that I'm not calling all people either a narcissist or an egoist. There exists a healthy narcissism within a spectrum, separate from full-blown personality disorder. And within the modern definition, a person without what's called healthy narcissism, everyone's got a little bit in them. A person without any narcissism would not have an ego. They would not self-advocate at all. And so when dealing with this dialectical tension, it's important to recognize the importance of these tendencies as being a part of a person's very establishment of self, their very presentation of their ego, and of their will. And so both parties need to be sensitive with each other again, and again meet each other halfway. Overt narcissism and egoism, they become unhealthy, these tendencies, when they're used to meet the needs of a person who doesn't feel like they can get their needs met conventionally. Basically, people become manipulative when they don't feel like they grew up in a setting where they couldn't actually ask for what they needed and get it, and so they found it a different way. Um, and so when someone feels unconsidered in discussion, they may result to their narcissistic or egoistic tendencies to get what they want or otherwise feel that they need. And what prevents this is a mutual respect and mindfulness of each other. Overt communicators, they can bridge the gap by asking what the coverts think and want and provide them room in the conversation, creating a space where honesty feels safe to them. And coverts can bridge the gap by being honest about the way that they feel within the conversation, and by also taking ownership of their self-advocacy and not placing the responsibility of it on others, which there tends to be like a villainization of the overt narcissist by the egoist, but they are actually on opposite sides of the spectrum, both of which are unhealthy. And so it is very important that people who have a hard time advocating for themselves, if they are in the presence of someone who is willing to give them space, they need to be willing to take up that space. And so my understandings and my perceptions of all of this, I think my understandings of these specific dialectical tensions and just dialectical tensions in general help me be more proactive. From my studies in psychology, I've learned that these tendencies, however unpalatable, are often rooted in trauma or other significant formative life events. And so knowing this, it helps me to be more compassionate when tensions arise. And rather than reducing someone to a jerk or an idiot, I can humanize their flaws and tendencies and recognize that rather than a personal attack or just sheer carelessness, people often have these tendencies out of a sense of safety or a sense of fear. And so in this, I can also recognize when my own tendencies can be challenging for others, while also respecting where they come from and being kind to myself and patient with myself when I do struggle with that. And so, what can seem unreasonable on the other side, whether it be someone who needs a lot of certainty or hates certainty, or someone who's really forward, or someone who is very skittish. It can all seem so unreasonable, but it can be reasoned with compassion and patience. When everyone makes space for each other and their unique needs, everyone can feel comfortable having needs at all. When this mutuality is met, ironically, people seem to become less needy. They're just comfortable with each other. Communication feels open and not scary, or like it's something that you need to force yourself through or navigate super carefully. And so going on to the second half of the discussion, face-to-face versus virtual. So in person, my relationships feel a lot more dynamic. For team projects, I can have dinner with my teammates, study with each other, banter, really get to know them. And I feel that these things make communication more effective, not only by making communication more comfortable, but also by knowing the people's personality. It helps establishing respect become easier, and making collaboration debate more productive and less unintentionally antagonizing. If you know people's sensitivities and their personality and the way that they tend to present themselves, you can, being considerate of that can really go a long way in being able to get your point across and be heard. and also knowing that someone just tends to be a certain way and they're not just being a jerk to you can also make it a lot easier to hear them. And so I think virtual platforms underfeed interpersonal relations. Usually online interactions are only professional, making collaboration, in my opinion, less fulfilling. In person, you'll see your teammates or classmates all walking out of class together, or in passing or on campus. And I think the removal of these little things disconnect us from each other. When it comes to the level of disclosure between these two mediums, I think it's starkly different. Since I feel like I barely know my online classmates often, I don't share really anything personal or really contact them outside of class, as there's nothing much to do really. And not only do I not contact them for like personal things and just like, hey, like let's talk about something for fun, I also find myself less likely to reach out for help, if that's all I'm doing even. And so in person, classmates, I feel much more comfortable reaching out for help, asking for an ear to listen, to vent to, or just hang out. Online, I feel like there's this fundamental friction to deeper connection, unless it's very deliberately fostered. Or in person, it just kind of happens. Online, you really need to push for it, and even when you do, it doesn't feel like very often that is reciprocated. But I do think, however, if classes are structured in the right way and students are willing to conduct themselves in new ways, it can be a lot better. I think honestly a lot of why it's not natural is because this is not something that we're used to. And you can make an argument as to whether we should get used to this or not, whether that's a good thing. But I think it's at least a factor that we don't have a whole lot of practice getting to know each other on online platforms like this, especially in college. I found it hard enough to do that with social media and things that are made for that. So I would say be patient and keep trying. So yeah, that pretty much sums everything up. Thank you for listening.